It happens more than you think. Someone retires with a sense of relief. Long career is over. The nest egg, it looks solid. And for the first few years, everything feels fine. But around age 70, something shifts. Required minimum distributions kick in. Healthcare costs quietly start rising. And the market dips. And then suddenly, the money that once felt abundant starts running low fast. That's the terrifying moment retirees face when the plan wasn't built to last. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to happen to you, because the signs that your retirement plan won't go the distance, they're visible now, if you know what to look for. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 5 major signs your plan might fall short and what you can do today to make sure that your money lasts well into your 80s, 90s, and beyond. Hey there, I'm Mark Wisniewski, president of Southern Incomes. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that my goal is simple: to help smart people like you retire with clarity, confidence, and control. I've worked with hundreds of pre-retirees and retirees, and I can tell you, it's not about how much money that you start with, it's about how long it lasts. Too many people head into retirement thinking they're set, only to realize too late that their plan had gaps and hidden risks or unrealistic assumptions that were never addressed. So today, I'm going to break down the 5 warning signs that your retirement plan might not make it past 70. And even if one of these signs hits home, don't panic. I'll give you practical steps to course correct before it's too late. So let's dive in. Sign number 1, you're guessing your spending needs instead of planning them. One of the most common and most dangerous mistakes that people make heading into retirement is assuming that their current spending habits will automatically adjust when they stop working. They think, well, I won't have a mortgage or I won't have a commute anymore. And they use that as justification to guess that their retirement budget is all taken care of. But here's the reality. Guesswork is not a strategy. And in retirement, small miscalculations can turn into major financial problems. The truth is, spending doesn't always decrease after retirement. And for many, it increases in those early years. That's because this is when you finally have time and freedom to do everything that you've been putting off. You travel, you make home upgrades, you have family experiences, hobbies, new business ideas, you name it. These are the go-go years, as we call them, and they can quietly drain a portfolio that wasn't built to support that pace of spending. Then, later in life, you go to the slow-go or the no-go years where healthcare costs begin to rise, sometimes drastically. And if you didn't prepare for those rising costs or you spent too much in those early years, you can find yourself facing real trade-offs in your 70s and beyond. Another key issue, inflation. If you assume that your current $5,000 monthly budget will cover you indefinitely, you're ignoring the silent risk inflation presents to retirees over 20 and 30 years. So, what's the fix? You need a dynamic withdrawal plan, one that breaks retirement into phases and realistically accounts for lifestyle changes, inflation, taxes, healthcare costs, and income sources like your Social Security or your pensions. You should know not just how much you'll spend each year, but where it's going to come from and how you'll adapt as the markets shift. Because without that level of clarity, you're not just taking a risk, you're setting yourself up for your plan to run out before you do. Sign number 2, you're relying too heavily on the stock market to do the work in your plan. This is the big one, and it's incredibly common. Far too many retirees are depending on the market to bail them out of poor planning. They assume that because the market has a historically averaged 7 to 10% returns, that their portfolio will just keep growing enough to cover their withdrawals indefinitely. But the market doesn't work on averages. It works in real time, and volatility is a real threat, especially in retirement. Here's why this is dangerous. When you're working, market downturns are frustrating, but you're still contributing to your account, so that smooths out your returns over time. But in retirement, you're no longer contributing, you're withdrawing. And when you withdraw during a market downturn, you're not just taking money out, you're locking in losses. This is called sequence of return risk, and it's one of the leading causes of retirement plan failures. No question about it. So let's say the market drops 20% in your first or second year of retirement. If you're withdrawing, say, 4 to 5% to live on, you're digging a hole that could take years to recover, if your portfolio ever recovers at all. And here's the kicker. The timing of returns matters more in retirement than the average. Two retirees with the same total return over 30 years can end up in very different places depending on when those gains and losses occur. A few bad years early on can permanently damage the sustainability of a retirement portfolio. So, what's the solution? Retirement portfolios need to be built for resilience, not just growth. And what does that mean? So that's creating a bucket strategy with short-term, medium-term, and long-term allocations. Holding enough cash or fixed income to weather a downturn without being forced to sell stocks. Having a clear withdrawal strategy that adapts to market performance, not one that blindly pulls the same amount no matter what. Hope is not a plan, and betting your retirement on the market always winds up as a gamble that you can't afford to lose. Sign number 3, you don't know how much you're actually spending. This is the silent killer of retirement plans. Most people assume that once they hit retirement, their spending will naturally go down. They think, and it makes sense, that I won't be commuting, I won't be paying for work lunches, I'll travel a little, but overall, I'm going to be spending less. But in reality, spending rarely drops as much as people think. In fact, many retirees spend more in their first 5 to 10 years of retirement than they ever expected to. This is known as the go-go years, when you're still healthy and active and you finally have time to do the things that you've put off for decades. That means travel, home renovations, family trips, and maybe even starting a new hobby or a new business. Here's the problem. If your retirement plan assumes reduced spending, but your actual lifestyle says otherwise, you're going to drain your savings a lot faster than expected. Even worse, many retirees don't even track their spending. They just make some ballpark estimate, or they rely on outdated budgets back from when they were working. But retirement spending is different. It's more dynamic, and it's influenced by healthcare costs, inflation, lifestyle changes, and unexpected family expenses. If you don't know what's coming out, it doesn't matter how much you saved. You're flying blind. So what's the fix? Build a realistic retirement budget, not a hopeful one. Include one-time expenses that will happen more than once. Plan for inflation across all categories, not just groceries and gas. Separate your needs, wants, and your wishes and match them to reliable income sources. If you don't get clear on your expenses, your retirement plan isn't a plan, it's a guess, and that's not going to be good enough. Sign number 4, you're relying too heavily on market returns. A solid retirement plan isn't just about how much you saved, it's also about how much risk you're willing to take on with those savings. One of the biggest mistakes retirees make is assuming that the market will always deliver the returns that they need year after year after year. And maybe your plan assumes a 7% or 8% growth because that's what your portfolio has averaged during your working years. But here's the problem. Average returns don't matter as much in retirement. Sequence of returns do. Let me explain. When you're working and contributing to your portfolio, market volatility is like a speed bump. You're buying during the highs and the lows, but once you retire and start withdrawing from your accounts, a bad year early on can devastate your portfolio, even if the average return still looks good on paper. This is called sequence of return risk. So imagine two retirees with identical savings and identical returns over 20 years. The only difference is the order of returns. One gets a few great years first and then some down markets later. The other hits a bear market in year 1 or 2 of retirement. Guess what? That second retiree could run out of money years earlier simply because the market dipped when the withdrawals started. That's why relying too heavily on investment performance to fund your retirement can backfire. The market doesn't care that you're 65 now. It doesn't owe you anything just because you stopped working. If your plan hinges on getting consistent 7% returns to make the math work, your plan is broken. Here's the solution. Break your portfolio into income buckets, short, medium, and long term, so that you don't have to sell investments in a down market. Use more conservative return assumptions in your planning. Build a margin of safety and stress test your plan against that market volatility. Diversify not just your investments, but your income sources so that you're not 100% depending on your portfolio to fund your lifestyle. A retirement plan that's too reliant on the market is like a ticking time bomb. You need a strategy that can weather storms, not just ride the highs. Sign number 5, you haven't accounted for rising healthcare costs. This is one of the most underestimated retirement expenses. And healthcare, it's one of the few areas where your costs are virtually guaranteed to rise as you age. You may have planned for travel and dining out and even spoiling the grandkids, but did you account for Medicare premiums, out-of-pocket expenses, long-term care, and inflation in healthcare costs? If not, it's incomplete and potentially dangerous. Here's the reality. The average couple retiring today at age 65 can expect to spend $315,000 on healthcare throughout their retirement. That doesn't even include long-term care, which can easily run $100,000 per year or more, depending on your needs. And healthcare inflation outpaces regular inflation almost every year, meaning the cost of care could double by the time you're in your 80s or 90s. And if you're thinking, well, Medicare will cover it, you better think again. Yes, Medicare helps, but it doesn't cover everything. You'll still be responsible for premiums, deductibles, co-pays, dental, vision, hearing, and most long-term care expenses. Many retirement plans ignore this reality. They build in basic inflation for your spending, but fail to carve out a specific strategy for healthcare. And that's a big red flag. So what should you do instead? Build a separate healthcare budget into your retirement plan. Just don't lump it in with everyday expenses. And consider a health savings account, or HSA, if you're still working. These are one of the most tax-efficient ways to save for future medical costs. And explore long-term care insurance, or hybrid life insurance policies, or self-funding strategies, especially if you want to protect your spouse or heirs. And finally, stress test your plan using conservative assumptions for medical inflation. You might not know what your healthcare needs will be, but you do know that they're going to be coming. If your plan doesn't reflect that, it may not last as long as you do. And if you saw yourself in one or more of these signs, don't panic, but don't ignore them either. A retirement plan isn't a one-time event. It's a living, breathing strategy that needs to adapt to your life and taxes and the economy as they all change. The earlier you spot the weaknesses, the easier it is to fix, because the truth is, retirement success isn't about luck and timing or guessing the market. It's about having a strategy that's built to last through your 70s, 80s, and well into your 90s. And the difference between barely getting by and thriving in retirement often comes down to fixing these 5 issues before they begin to snowball. So if you're ready to find out whether your current plan is built to last, book a time with me using the link in the description. Let's make sure that you're not just retired, but that you're confidently retired.